The gift of God's love is great, it is super abundant, and it is greater than what we can ever imagine. Therefore, blood, sweat, and tears. You might hear that as a common expression in our English language or even in our own American colloquialism, how those words indicate a great deal of sacrifice, that we have poured out all of our hearts, all of our efforts into one particular cause. It could be going to med school. That's very, very difficult, very, very tough. It could be going to seminary. It is very, very difficult. It is very, very tough. It could be teaching your teenager how to drive. It is very, very difficult. It is very, very tough, especially now with higher insurance rates. My goodness. It could be providing and making sure that there's food on the table. It could be very, very difficult. It could be very, very tough. It could be dealing with your spouse. Please respond after me. It could be very, very difficult. It could be very, very tough. Now, friends, that list can be endless. That the Lord has given us a very great spirit to endure. It is a courageous spirit. However, the Lord gives us that ability because it is reminiscent of His own ability. The Lord Himself sacrifices with blood, sweat, and tears, not just figuratively, but also literally. Figuratively, at least we can hear it very much so in the Old Testament when the Lord reestablishes a covenant with His people that always seeks to do their own thing. But their own thing doesn't bring life. In fact, they don't even know what their own thing does. It's just that when they're tired of their own thing and they see themselves dying, they reach out, Lord, help me, I was wrong, okay. And then go back to sinning again. And therefore, the Lord Himself seeks to reestablish a covenant not just made by words on a tablet, as good as those things are. You would think that those will be sufficient, but also remind us of the law that has been written in our hearts, a law that establishes permanence, a law that allows another individual to make a decision not just by guided mechanisms, but from their own heart, so that they too can make a sacrifice. And the Lord Himself renews that, as we hear in the letter to the Hebrews, the gift of the priesthood, that not only this nice, handsome, awesome 33-year-old gets to celebrate Mass here, but we all do. We all get to partake in this great mystery. We all get to bring up our offerings to the Lord and say, Lord, please receive that. Receive my blood. Receive my sweat. Receive my tears. Receive all the toil that I am offering for your sake. Consequently, we hear in the gospel how the Lord's time is coming, and where those followers of His, some may be disciples, some may be onlookers, look towards that Jesus Christ who will be crucified for them. They didn't know how this would look like, but they all wanted to pay homage to the one that truly saves, because as we have already heard, the law of the Lord has already been written in their hearts. Now, in this whole theme of blood, sweat, and tears, the theme of courage may be mistaken or may have been forgotten or taken for granted. But the Lord calls us to sacrifice not just for our own sake. The Lord is calling us to sacrifice for the sake and well-being of the greater good. That's what God did, and He's inviting us to share in that. One particular theme, one particular word becomes so clear. It is the word spoken of as grace. Now, in common, maybe colloquial terms or societal terms, we might hear grace as being devalued sometimes as just being nice to another person. But grace is more than just that. Sometimes you have to be tough with another person. Sometimes you have to call another person out with great charity. So grace has to be even more than that if grace comes from God. Grace can be defined as this: action of God. And this action of God is ever abundant. It is ever alive. It is ever ready to speak to our hearts, but we must be disposed to listen. Now, grace can be salvific. Grace can be sanctifying. Grace can be healing. But all of this grace doesn't come into our hearts, first of all, without the Lord's own sacrifice and without our own willing it. Meaning that the Lord himself doesn't seek to give us what we don't want to receive. That would be an imposition. That would be a manipulation. But the Lord doesn't do that. He sacrifices time and time again for our own good. Notice how even in this sacrifice, we may not respond to it well. We might not like it. We might want to ignore it. But the Lord himself loves us so dearly that he gives us the ability to choose yet again. So that at the end of the day, even when we despise his sacrifice, he himself is not scorned in his own integrity. He knows who he is. Therefore, friends, in our own sacrifice, even when others don't respond the way we like, must we be scorned in our own integrity, or must we love as God loves? Friends, this is the task of discipleship, that we as instruments of God's love and grace just continue to offer ourselves for the greater good, whether or not we see it. And that the Lord, who sees everything, will repay us according to his will. Friends, that is none other than the kingdom of heaven waiting for us in its fullness in heaven. That's what I look forward to. Do you?